Welcome to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor, the podcast where we dive deep into the worlds of healing and the truths about spirituality, mental health, and the soul. This podcast is for the real ones, the ones who have the courage to dig deep, the ones who are longing to heal and willing to do the work, and the ones who are ready to embrace and fully stand in their own truth and get to know who they truly are deep within the soul. I'm your host, Pauline, here to guide you towards your own soul truth and cultivating a life of authenticity and alignment. So let's get into it. Welcome to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor. On this episode, I'll be sharing about how life turned me into a fighter and the hard lessons and soul truths I learned while training for a boxing match, all while battling my own personal loss, pain, and grief. One of the main reasons why I chose to release my podcast on November 5th is because 4 years ago, on November 5th, 2021, I had my first official amateur boxing match. That's right, your girl is a whole boxer. But the craziest part about it all is that the entire time that I was training for my fight, my father was fighting for his life in the hospital. I was in training camp for 3 months, and that training camp became more than just a camp for boxing. It became a training camp for my soul. Because the ways I was tested and tried physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually were beyond anything that I had ever faced in my entire life. I was pushed and tried beyond my limits and in ways that I did not even think were possible. It was a really freaking hard time in my life. That training camp, it became more than just preparing me to step in the ring for my big fight. It prepared me for losing my dad. And it prepared me for the biggest and toughest fight and opponent that I'd ever have in my life thus far. And that opponent was grief. Now, some of y'all might be wondering, how the hell did I even get into a sport like boxing? Because as I mentioned in my first episode, I'm a psychotherapist, a psychic medium. So I'm a very kind, compassionate, and highly spiritual person. And most people would probably think that a person like me, with the background that I have and the work that I do, would not really be interested in a sport like boxing that's considered to be very violent and aggressive. And yes, it can absolutely be those things. But boxing is also a beautiful, sweet science, and I love it. I love the strategy of boxing. I love the critical thinking that comes with boxing. I love the discipline and the mental fortitude that it has built in me. You know, boxing has really changed my life and it's empowered me tremendously as a person and especially as a woman, because there's not a lot of women in this sport. And it truly just started off as a fitness thing. You know, I did enjoy watching boxing because, you know, my dad was actually a really big boxing fan. And my dad was a very loyal, you know, diehard Manny Pacquiao fan. And of course, I'm a hardcore Pacquiao fan myself because obviously we are Filipino. So you already know that is our pride and joy right there. So I always enjoyed watching boxing matches. And one day I decided to actually just try it out. And from the first day I went to my boxing gym, I immediately fell in love with it. Immediately. And honestly, I was pretty good at it from the start. You know, I had a lot to learn, but I was naturally pretty quick at picking up the skills. And funny enough, I actually have really long arms. So I low key think I was like built for this sport, you know? But, you know, I really loved it so much. And I found myself going to the boxing gym like very regularly throughout the week. And I have to say, boxing is one of the very few things in my life that really make me feel alive. And it's not because of the aggression or the violence of the sport. You know, there's something about feeling that power in your body. There's something about knowing that you have that power and that capability within you that just, I don't know, it just wakes you up, you know, and it just makes you feel alive, you know, and I get that feeling every single time I box. And I've been boxing now for 6.5 years. And I still get that feeling every single time. So when I started my boxing journey, you know, like I said, it was just for the workout. But eventually I started dedicating more time to really learning the skills and the technicalities of the sport. And eventually, my coach had invited me to come spar one day. And mind you, I had zero intentions of sparring, let alone fighting, when I joined this gym. But at that point, I had already been training so hard, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And, when I first sparred, it was absolutely humbling because trust me, getting punched in the face is going to humble you real fast, like real fast. But I also loved it. It was fun and it was challenging. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed the whole experience. So I kept going with it. And eventually one day I was like, Pauline, what are you doing? Like, you're in here all the time training. You're continually trying to improve your skills. You're sparring. Like, what are you actually doing all of this for? And that's when I decided to take it up a notch and actually compete and try to fight, and see what I could really do with my skills. So about 2 weeks before I started my training camp is when my father had to go to the hospital. Now, my father has had a long-standing history with his heart, mainly due to genetics. And when he went to the hospital, of course, I was concerned, but I thought, okay, at most, maybe it'll be just a few days. But unfortunately, it turned into 3 long, agonizing, and extremely stressful months of him being in the hospital. So after the first couple weeks of him being in the hospital, the doctors had recommended that he undergo a second major open heart surgery. And my father had had this exact surgery about 12 years prior. And although it was a hard, long road of recovery, he was able to get through it and recover and live a healthier life. So when the surgery came up again, of course, we knew it could be another long, hard road, especially now that he was older. But I was pretty confident that he would get through it because he had already done it before. And although the surgery did help to repair what needed to be fixed in his heart, it also led to a slew of major complications throughout other parts of his body. The truth is, my father never fully recovered from his surgery. His body just could not come back. It just became complication after complication, so many ups and downs. One thing gets better, another thing gets worse. And this was the battle that we were facing for 3 whole months in the hospital. Now, some of you might be thinking, why would you even still commit to fighting, knowing that your dad was going through all of this? Or some of you may think this is probably really bad timing, that my fight and my training camp was coinciding with all this happening with my dad's health and his hospitalization. But the truth is, when I look back on it now, I realize that it was actually perfect timing. Because if I did not have boxing during that time in my life, I don't know where I'd be. When I tell you that boxing truly saved me during that time, it really saved me. Because if I didn't have boxing, I probably would have had a mental breakdown at some point or just crashed out, or I would have been maybe totally debilitated by my grief and my anxiety. Because everything I was battling through that time was so challenging and difficult and hard. The emotional roller coaster I was on every single day was insane. I literally felt like I was living in a nightmare for 3 whole months. And it was like this constant, horrible roller coaster, like I said, and we did not know when this ride was ever going to end. Now, mind you, this is all happening still during the pandemic. So at this time, we were still restricted and limited in terms of what we were able to do. So I didn't have a lot of outlets during that time from my stress, and from my anxiety. But the 2 things that were really constant for me during that time were God and boxing. Now, along with all that, I was still working full time. I was still seeing my psychotherapy clients all day. So I would be in session all day, holding space for all my clients, and they're helping them through their problems. And then I will go to the gym, and try to just relieve my stress and relieve all the fear and the sadness and the worry that I had about my dad. I was training 6 days a week and at least 2 hours a day. But those hours that I was in the boxing gym, That was my refuge. That was my safe haven. Those were the times I could actually turn my brain off and not have to worry about my dad or worry about everything else that was happening in my life or worry about my clients. That was a time that all I had to do was just think about boxing, and that's it. And that's how it saved me. That's how it helped me because it gave me a space where I could just be me for a couple hours a day. Because once I left that gym, all the craziness, all the stress, all the worry, the anxiety, the sadness, everything will come flooding back. But at least I had those few hours where I could just feel like myself for even just a little bit. Training during that time was absolutely insane. There were days I still vividly remember I would go to the gym, I pull up, and I would be wrapping my hands, before my training session starts. And I would just start crying as I'm wrapping my hands, and then someone would come over to me and they'd be like, "Are you okay?" And, I'm crying because that day I had just gotten bad news about my dad, or there were times where I would go through a really hard training session, go through hard sparring. And at the end of the session, I just cry because all the emotions would start coming out. There were times I'd be in the middle of training and in the middle of throwing a combination, and I would feel the tears welling up in my eyes. And after I was done, I would just start crying because, I'm being challenged so much physically, but I'm also trying to hold and manage all these really strong and really hard emotions that are in me, so it was all coming out in the gym. It's like, yes, it was my outlet for my stress, it was the outlet for my sadness and my anxiety, but it was also the outlet for my pain. It was a way for me to move the energy through my body. I had to get it out, and it was just pouring out even when I didn't want it to. Like, I was really so vulnerable in my boxing gym now that I think about it in so many ways. And I really got to say shout out to my coaches and my fight team because they were really there for me during that time. They knew how much I was going up against, they knew how much I was battling internally, you know, along with all the physical stuff I was having to battle with in training camp. I still remember this one time when my coach sat on the bench and cried with me because she knew it was so hard. She knew I was so sad and I was just going through such a crazy roller coaster. But despite all of those emotions, despite all those challenges, I never gave up. I still showed up at that gym every single day and I gave it my best. No matter how freaking sad I was, no matter how scared I was about losing my dad or how anxious I was, I gave it my all every single training session. And my dad, he was the biggest inspiration that got me through camp because I know that he was fighting a harder battle than me. He's literally fighting for his life. He was having to overcome all these really difficult medical problems. And when I tell you, it was the craziest time because it was like one day something of his would improve, but then something else would worsen. Like we could never catch a break with him because something was always becoming more complicated than the other. And that was just so gut wrenching to have to deal with that on a day to day basis. There were 3 different times throughout my father's hospitalization that the doctors told us he probably wouldn't make it. We had 3 separate conversations where the doctors basically prepared us to lose him because they're like, he may not make it through the next couple of days. He may not make it past the weekend. But my dad did. All those 3 times we were told he probably wouldn't make it. He made it. He overcame it. So my dad, he's a whole fighter too. Now you can see where I get it from. There were times in camp where I would be so exhausted and so tired. And, as a fighter, when you're preparing for a fight, there's so much mental battle that you go through. There's moments where you really doubt yourself. There's moments when you ask yourself, can I really do this? Am I good enough to win a fight? Am I training hard enough? You question everything about you. And the moments that were really hard, the moments where I wanted to stop and rest or take a break, are the moments that I would think about my dad. And I would think about everything he was battling and overcoming in the hospital and how hard he was fighting to keep living. And that's what would keep me going. That's what kept me going strong. That's what kept me fighting. That's what kept me to not give up. Because I knew that my dad's fight was way harder than mine. So it inspired me, you know? And it's crazy because when I think about how the doctors told us that he wouldn't make it those 3 different times, and he did, despite all the chaos and uncertainty that was going on with his health, God was also showing me that miracles are possible. Because my dad beating the odds those 3 different times, those were 3 different miracles. So those moments, those miracles, they also gave me hope. They also gave me faith. And they gave me the drive and the motivation that I needed to keep going. And the irony is, the same exact things that were stressing me out, my dad's prognosis, all the medical issues he was facing, all the medical problems that were going on, those exact same things were also the things that were inspiring me to keep going, that were inspiring me to keep fighting, that were inspiring me to keep showing up for myself. And looking back now, I realize that that time in my life, as hard as it was also extremely special and sacred to my entire being and my soul, because I realized after that it showed me how strong I really am. And it really showed me, and I say this very humbly, but it really showed me how I am truly built different. Because I can recognize the fact, and I'm saying this as a whole therapist, I know that what I was going through and what I was doing is not normal. Okay? This is not a normal way of coping with this type of hardship. All right. These are very high levels of stress that I was dealing with. This is not your everyday, normal, average level of human stress. I recognize that I was doing something very extreme, because fighting is a very extreme thing to do, all while coping with a very extreme life situation, which was my father being critically ill and literally dying in the hospital. So I know this is not normal. And y'all might think I'm crazy, and maybe I kind of am. I mean, you do kind of have to be a little crazy to get into a boxing ring, but you know, it's what got me through it. And I made it through. I somehow made it through by my faith and the grace of God and the amazing support system that He blessed me with at that time. I made it through. So the funny thing is, as big of a fan as my dad was of boxing, he was all for me learning how to box for fun, learning how to box as a workout. But he was not in favor of me sparring. In fact, he didn't even want me sparring because he was really worried that I would get hurt. So I highly doubt he may have been in favor of me fighting, but I did it anyway because it's something that I really wanted to do for myself. It's something that I really wanted to prove to myself. And it was important to me to do this. And the day before my fight, I went to the hospital to visit my dad. And that was when I told him that I would be fighting the next day. And I told him that I was dedicating my fight to him. And I distinctly remember saying to him, Dad, I'm going to win this fight for you. And I'm going to win this fight for us. And that is exactly what I did. That's right. I freaking won my fight. And I brought that belt home that night. And the next day, I went right back to the hospital and I brought my belt with me to the hospital so that I could show my dad my belt. And mind you, at this time, my father was very, very critically ill at this time, So I had to do what I could to relay this message, So I showed him my belt and I played him the video and I put the phone up to his ear so he could hear when the announcer said that I had won the fight. And I really thank God for that moment. I thank God that my father held on long enough for me to be able to get through my fight and for me to be able to share with him in that moment that I had won it for him, that he was my inspiration and my motivation. And I did it. I did it for him, but I also did it for myself. That win is still one of the proudest and most exciting moments of my life. It is definitely a highlight of my life so far. And it was symbolic in so many ways for me, right? Because that win, it didn't just solidify the fact that I was a good fighter and that I could win this fight, but it also really showed me that all that hard work I put in the gym was worth it. That believing in myself could really take me as far as I believe that it could. It showed me that confidence was key, that mindset is key, and that I could truly do anything I put my mind to. It also taught me that I could overcome any battle, any obstacle, any hardship that I faced. Because that win was more than just me winning that fight. That win was me overcoming everything that I was battling the entire training camp. From all the technicalities of boxing to everything emotionally I was going through with my father. That win was my peak moment of knowing, yes, Pauline, you can do it. You can do anything you put your freaking mind to. And it really showed me that I am a fighter in every sense of the word. I am not just a fighter in the ring. I'm a fighter in life. Because I didn't give up in that time, and I still don't give up. I never give up, and I won't give up. I will always fight. But if I hadn't gone through that hard ass time in my life, I would not have known the type of fighter that I actually am. And I wouldn't have known that I have this incredible strength and resilience within me that God strategically placed in me to be able to do all the things that I did back then and that I'm still doing now. In those short 3 months, I learned some of the most important and valuable lessons of my entire life. And those lessons are exactly what was going to carry me through the next season of my life, which became one of the most difficult seasons. Sadly, just 2 weeks after I won my fight, my father passed away. My father fought as hard as he could. And I'm getting choked up talking about this because I saw how much he had to overcome. And he fought. He really freaking fought until his physical body could not fight anymore. So my dad's fighting spirit and his legacy will always be remembered, and it will always live within me. And you can imagine that after my dad passed away, the grief became so much worse. You know, my grief was interesting in the fact that my grief didn't start when my dad passed away. My grief started after my father's surgery because my dad was never the same after his surgery. I never fully got my dad back. The complications were so severe that, there were times that he wasn't fully conscious, let alone aware of what was happening. And he was not able to speak anymore after his surgery. He was in ICU for a very long time. So my grief was already happening during that time because I was slowly watching my father fade away. I never got my dad back. And that was really hard, you know, to grieve someone who's actually still alive, but they're not the same at the same time. So my grief it only intensified and worsened, after my father's passing. And I'll definitely be talking more about that in future episodes because there's so much there that I had to go through and so much that I learned through that incredibly challenging and difficult time in my life with my grief after his passing. But even the grief during this training camp was so real and hard and very painful. This was such a traumatic time in my life, but I can look back now and see that as hard as it was, it also taught me the most. I realized that the lessons were not in the win. It was not in my victory. That solidified the lessons, the lessons of strength, the lessons of hard work, of faith, of perseverance, of courage, of bravery. But the lessons, it wasn't in that pinnacle moment of glory. The lessons came during the dark times. The lessons came during the hard times. The lessons came in my brokenness. The lessons came in my tears. The lessons came when I was tried and challenged and pushed beyond my limits. When you are being pushed beyond your limits and you're really being tested and every part of you is being tested, that's when you are forced to dig deep and find something within you to get you through. And that is a soul truth moment. That's when you got to go deep into your soul and uncover something that you may not have even known was there to pull you through. Those are the moments that you realize that maybe there is a special gift within you that you didn't even know existed, or that there's a gift in you that you didn't realize was as powerful as it is. Those moments that bare your soul and try you beyond your limits, those are the moments when so much is revealed to you about who you really are and what you're really made of and what your soul actually contains within you. Those are the moments when God is going to show you exactly who He made you to be. It's in your brokenness that you actually find yourself. So here I am now, 4 years later. And when I look back at that time in my life, I honestly still cannot believe that I did all that. I'm still in somewhat disbelief of myself that I did all those things and got through that entire period of my life. But I have to say, I really give so much gratitude to God, for everything that He provided for me to get me through that time, because He really did set me up to be able to get through it. He put all the right people and all the right things in place to get me through that season of my life. And when I was going through all that, there were times where I wasn't really sure if I'd ever be myself again. I wasn't sure if I'd find myself again after going through all of that with my dad. And now, 4 years later, I can look back and see how much I've grown and changed since that time in my life and how much those lessons have really shaped me to be a better, healthier, and stronger and happier person that I am today. As hard as that time was, as traumatic as that time was, that entire experience, that training camp for my soul really made me into the person that I am today. I would not be this version of Pauline without that experience, without going through that hard time. It really made me into a different person, but for the better. And this is where I can really have gratitude for the hardship. I can have gratitude for the battles. I can have gratitude for the pain, because as much as it broke me, it also rebuilt me into somebody better. The truth is, pain is one of our greatest teachers in life. And the irony is that pain is sometimes the medicine that we need, because pain not only teaches us about life, it teaches us about who we are, and it teaches us how to live differently. It forces us to make changes, and it can encourage us to become better people and better souls if we use it correctly. Pain can strengthen and deepen your connection to your soul, but it can also increase your connection and your faith in God and in the universe. Your greatest losses in life can truly be your biggest lessons, because pain can really do something incredible in your life if you allow it to, in the sense that it's not about letting the pain destroy you, because it's never meant to destroy you. What it's meant to do is not only teach you, but to strengthen you and sharpen you to be a better person and to be a better soul. It's meant to sharpen your skills. It's meant to sharpen your strength. It's meant to build up your confidence and your power. Pain can transform you into a completely different person if you use it in a healthy way and if you choose to heal it. Because no one wants to live in pain forever. But the reality is, as humans, we will experience pain, but we can also heal it. And as I mentioned in my first episode, I like to look at life through a soul lens. And if you can start looking at your life and your pain through a soul lens, you will see that it's teaching you something more. It's teaching you more than what hurts. It's teaching you something deeper that your soul needs. No matter what you are facing in life or what you've been through or what you're going through, please remember that everything we go through in life is serving a higher purpose for us and for our souls. You know how they say life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And it's true. It's not just happening for you, it's happening for your soul too. I know that life can be really freaking hard sometimes. And yes, it can be incredibly painful. I know. But there's something very sacred in that pain. There are valuable lessons in those hardships. So I encourage you and I invite you to look through that soul lens and see what it is that God is trying to teach you and show you through your pain and through your struggles. I know that you may not understand everything right now. If you're going through something, maybe you're not sure why it's happening to you. Or even if you already been through something and you still don't understand why. I know there can be a lot of confusion when it comes to life's problems and hardships. But I promise you, if you start looking through that soul lens, and if you trust in God and have that faith in divine timing, one day you will understand. And that will be your soul truth. That moment of realization, that moment of the lesson being revealed, that's your soul truth. Because we're always learning. We're learning through every experience that we go through in life. It's just a matter of opening our eyes to see it. In boxing, we always say that boxing is life and it's you versus you. And whether you're a fighter or not, that actually applies to everybody, because there really are parallels between boxing and different aspects and experiences that we have throughout life. And when you think about all the different challenges and problems that we face in our lives, it really is you versus you, because it's you versus the problem, you versus the obstacle, you having to fight through your emotions, having to fight against your old ways of being, or even fight against your old self. So it really is you versus you all the time. And yes, life will be hard sometimes, and we will have to fight. And we will have various opponents that we'll have to go up against throughout our lives. But as I learned in my training camp for the soul, and I hope that you all remember this too. 1, don't ever stop fighting. No matter how hard life gets, No matter what you are up against, don't give up and just keep fighting. Secondly, always believe in yourself. Know that you are capable and you are divinely designed to be able to face and fight through whatever problem you may have in your life. And remember that your soul contains every single thing that it needs within you to be able to conquer any challenge or adversity that you will face in your life. And lastly, remember that the soul truth, your soul truth, is in your fight. And once you see it, once you know and understand what it is and what it means, that is your victory. Thank you for listening to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor. I hope this sacred wisdom will continue to guide you along your path. We would love to hear from our listeners, so please show some love by leaving a review and a rating. Stay real, stay you, and stay blessed.